and kind of feel a little bit more comfortable of the rules. But even having a handshake is something that we have not had in Spain for the last year plus, 14, 15 months. And for us that are very social, and I don't know if I can communicate everything about Spanish culture, Basque culture, but one thing that is for sure is they are very social people. So it's really changed a huge dynamic. It's not anything to be waiting for my daughter to get out of piano lesson and I'm watching people walk down the street and two people will stop and talk, and I look up at 15 minutes later and they're still standing there talking. That is nothing unusual. And in fact, they'll stop right in the middle of the sidewalk. You have to walk around them. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And so anyway, that is a big change for us. And but anyway, you probably don't want to hear about that. I do feel, I'll just admit right off the bat, I do feel a little challenged. How do you sum up 5 years in, 35 minutes? I really can't. I'll be giving you bits and pieces, and maybe I'll get some comments from the peanut gallery over here to say, oh, don't forget to mention this. And what I want to do is I want to encourage you when we read in Acts of Paul coming back from his missionary journeys. He came back to his churches, his partners, and he wanted to encourage them to build them up. So that's my goal this morning. And truthfully, I'm looking forward to the second half where we can look into the Word and be able to share that with you. And it's already encouraged my heart the many times that I've read it, and so I'm raring to go. And so that's exciting for me. This is the challenging part because I don't want to bore you. I want to keep you awake, and but to build you up. And it's really to see. I think the best way I can build you up is to show you how God has answered prayers. As far as our partnership, you may say, look, I hardly know these people and they're on the other side of the world. Yes, but that's no problem for our God. And he listens and he cares. And, we don't exactly know how prayer works, but we know that our Father tells us to come and ask. And so we don't know all that you all have asked for us, but we know what we have written, and we know just communicating from Mr. Melvin and other people that you guys pray for us. And that's the partnership we have with you all, not just financially. Of course, that keeps us there, but way more important is the partnership in prayer and seeing God do his work. And so that's what I want to do. I want to show his works. I want you all to see how important that partnership is. And really, some of it is to understand what the culture is, because that will help you pray better. You'll understand, oh, that's what's going on there. Oh, okay. And maybe something will trigger that throughout the next couple years, and you'll say, let me pray for David. Let me pray for Jennifer. Let me pray for their kids. That's the way you partner with us. And that's a huge thing. Honestly, I can't overstate that enough. When we get to heaven, we'll see how God has answered prayers, and we'll really fully understand and say, wow, maybe I didn't value it as much as I had opportunities to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to step back. Are we going to be able to show that video? I get a thumbs up over there. Okay, so I can cover a lot of ground by pictures, and we've speaking fast in a video. Some of you may say, well, that's too fast, but I can cover a lot of ground that way. Then I'll come back up and I'll fill in, and what I want to do is I want to share some stories of some people that God has allowed us to be with and impact, and again, seeing how he's answered prayers. And then you'll probably have some questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some time for that after I get to talk, and then we have the video. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and show the video.
The Basque Country is the beautiful land of an ancient people, nestled between the Bay of Biscay and the Pyrenees Mountains along the border of France and Spain. Culturally and genetically distinct, this indigenous people group speaks a language with no relation to any other language on earth. The Basque language, Euskara, despite opposition through the centuries and banned by a dictator for 4 decades, has refused to die out. Euskara today flourishes in Basque communities around the world.
The Basque people are highly committed to the preservation of their culture and traditions. Traditional Basque dress, music, and food are at the heart of the yearly festivals celebrated since ancient times out of living memory and written record. Though the Basque people have deep roots in the Catholic religion, they have seen a dramatic shift in 2 generations from Catholicism to secularism. Adding to the complexity of their culture, the Basque people are seeing a modern migration of people from Romania, Africa, the Middle East, and many Spanish-speaking countries. This blending of people, cultures, and religions has added a new dimension to ministry here.
While acclimating to the diversities of living and ministering in this culture, we have jumped wholeheartedly into church ministry. From preaching and discipleship, children's ministries, and couples activities, to music and various camp-like ministries at the ARD farmhouse. At the same time, we have sought to develop redemptive relationships with those in our community by active participation in events and outreach opportunities. It has been amazing to see the Lord open doors before us, providing a house in the perfect location, softening hearts in a small Basque town to receive our family, allowing us to participate in numerous community activities like judo, soccer, orchestra, choir, and art, and giving us multiple opportunities to share our faith with our friends.
What's next for us? Our first term was full of a diversity of ministries and outreach. We built relationships, met for Bible studies, and took many opportunities to give the gospel. We have grown into a conversational level of Spanish. This in turn allows us to be involved in local communities and increases our exposure to more people. While becoming acclimated and more comfortable in ministry here, we continue investing in opportunities to reach their hearts.
For centuries, the link for the Basque people to their culture was their language. Everything was transmitted orally. Today, part of the language revitalization effort is aided by the Korrika, a biannual 11-day marathon. Because we were the first foreigners in the town to learn Basque, in 2019, our town chose us to represent them in this unique event that some people term as the world's longest relay race. This effort to revitalize the language over the last 25 years is now bearing fruit. Those under the age of 25 who speak Basque have dramatically grown from 25% to over 70%. Yet, their classification of being an unreached people group is evident. Very few Basque hymns exist. We were able to translate our first song with the help of our teacher.
Another surprising opportunity is that we are finding English to be a tool that opens doors for the gospel. We had our first outreach to Basque children in the summer of 2017 through a week-long evangelistic English camp.
Find a way to let somehow love your neighbor as yourself. Spend some time on someone else. Here we go. L-O-V-E. God's love is like no other. L-O-V-E. Share it with one another. Come on, everyone. Reach out and love someone. L-O-V-E. We're gonna love each other.
What a joy and surprise it was for us to see so many attend, hear the gospel, many for the first time ever, and take home a Bible or gospel children's book. And along with our English camps in 2018 and 2019, we have reached over 50 family groups. We are so grateful for those who have partnered with us and equipped us to put the written word into Basque homes. Lord willing, we will continue this outreach again once COVID is over.
God has answered your prayers. With eyes of faith, we have asked God for direction, and we are following him in pursuing the opportunities that he sets before us. We are working in and with a solid national church. We are currently forging a partnership with a national pastor, and we are serving in the church as we take steps together towards a church plant. Thank you for our partnership with you. Together, we equip each other to do our part to fulfill our Lord's commission to make faithful followers of these people. We could not go and share his good news without you holding the rope. By faith, we look forward to the fruit of your eternal investment with us.
For God, who commanded the light to shine out of darkness,
Es el que resplandeció en nuestros corazones.
Jesucristoren arpegian distira egiten duen, argiru esagut desagun.
All right, so let's see if we can answer some questions. You may have a question of, okay, wait a minute, they talked about Basque, Spanish, which one is it? Well, the answer is both. And that's what we expected. And that is also because we're in the Basque region, but yet is in Spain. And we talked a little bit in the video about how we believe God has positioned us to be there. We're not on the forefront of where they were really, Basque was illegal to speak in the 50s and 60s, but then now the door, okay, let's establish the language. Now they have with all those dialects, now you have Batua, which is unified language. So you have some people who still speak the dialects. In fact, you have kids who speak it their whole lives. They take the test when they're a senior in high school, and they don't even pass the Batua test because it's so different. And you're like, okay, that's a little different, and it is. But now with Batua, you can go from kindergarten all the way to your doctorate all in Basque. And so we believe God has positioned us to be there, to be able to, and we're not going to see it all in our lifetime, but we can sow some seeds, start translating some songs, get some things rolling that allows the next person, Lord willing, whoever God's going to send behind us, to help continue what we've already started and to continue having those resources, a good Basque Bible translation. That's what we're praying for, not one sanctioned by the Catholic Church, but we have to take what we have to keep things moving forward and say, okay, this is a growing, with eyes of faith, maybe in 100 years, what could be different? And so those are opportunities there. But yes, interacting in Spanish. At first, it was they had mercy on us, our town, and said, okay, you don't speak anything, so we're going to, as we were learning Spanish, and we're still not perfect at it, it'll be a lifelong learning, but that's an opportunity for us to keep learning Spanish. But they had mercy on us. But now that we're taking Basque classes, we can't communicate in Spanish anymore. They want to talk in Basque. And so it's like, okay, that's helping our Basque. So it's been a little bit of a balancing act to learn both at the same time. And I definitely wouldn't have planned it that way. But really, we talk about opportunities of pursuing what God has just really dropped in our lap and say, okay, this is obviously your will. This is your leading. We can do what you've asked us to do, and so we're going to do it. And it's been really, I've only been back a week, so this is just really tender for us, but it's just been really neat to see what God you communicate with someone that you're going to speak their language and you are learning their language, it's totally different. Where maybe there was some coldness before, they open right up and they want to know why. What's going on? What would motivate you? Why are you even an American here? Because that's very unusual. Everybody wants to get to America, but why would an American come to Spain? They know where they're at. I guess this is not a super bad thing to say, but people say that Spain is the head of Africa, but the tail of Europe. All right, so we know we're the lowest rung of Europe, but we know we're just above everybody else. So we're right on the border of a third world country. You go to southern Spain, Portugal, and you're like, oh, this definitely feels like a third world country. That's because we're right there. But that's okay. That's okay. But, they're still trying to peg us. And for the first 2 years, that we got that question constantly. Why are you here? So, and it really opened a lot of doors, because I can't tell you how many times the next question was when I'd say, I'm a pastor and God is sending us here to help a church start another church, and say, what's the difference? Oh, wow. I loved that question. And I can't tell you how many different people asked us that question. All our friends, we'd sit, and it's usually meals. We spent a lot of time with people around meals. Their meals are 3.5, 4 hours long, sometimes more than that. So you have a lot of time sitting across from someone. You're just like, what would you say? And I'm not a small talker, so I immediately, when we got there, thought, I don't know if I can do this. But it's pretty amazing. They can small talk with the people they live with, and they've grown up with them, and so they're 40 or 50, and they do this, I don't know, every month or whatever, and have a 4-hour meal and say, wouldn't you run out of things to say? People don't. But it really allows deep conversations, because they know where we're at. And so the next three-hour meeting we have with them, the meal, and they'll ask, what is different? And so really that's my opportunity. And that's where the beauty shines, because I can tell them about God's grace. You don't have to work for it. It's free. Despite what everybody is telling you, what you see in your culture, what you may have seen, even if you don't go to church, you see it in the Catholic all around you. But that's not what God says in his word. It is free. You can come to him, and he offers forgiveness, and you can be assured of that. All right, the second thing I wanted to share with you was, you may say, okay, church or community? God has just really blessed us with the opportunity to do both. The building in the church is there, and the opportunity, and we know we're standing on shoulders of giants, people that have gone in when Spain opened up in the late 60s, 67, 68. First round of American missionaries got there in 71, 72. And now that generation is really retiring or on the edge of retiring, or have already. And so we know what we're doing is continuing those seeds that have been planted. And so we can be with those churches. We've been with a church that's there's a lot going on, and it's been really neat. We can talk about the Ayerdi farmhouse, how God provided that, kind of a retreat area away that is really just equipping the church. And that's been a special opportunity for us as well. But then we look at the community side and say, God planted us with a group of people that is, to be honest with you, really unique. Unique in how God opened those doors. If you talk to people coming back, or they're familiar with the Basque people, they'll say Basque people are cold. They are very hard. They're very hard to get to know. And they say it themselves. But one man, I met with Yon for about 9 months, 3 times a week. He wanted to learn English, and of course I was just there, right new, just wanted to just garner relationships. And he taught me one thing. He said, you know what, Basque people are really hard to get to know, but when you make their friendship, you have a friend for life. And so, in different cultures you see, maybe they're really open, but truth be known, they don't stay your friend, or, they're almost like a false friend, where it's just every time the wind blows, they turn their back on you and everything. And we could see that even in different cultures here in America. But the Basque people, they are true blue, thick and thin. But it's hard to get to that point. Well, God just put that in our path. And I don't have time to tell you all the stories. I'll just tell you one. We were there about a month, and in fact, we didn't even know where we were going to live. How do you find a place to live there, right? So we had a place lined up. On the way over, that all fell through. So now we're like, where are we going to live? We don't know anybody that knows any place, and so we were working with a team, and so we said, okay, well, we'll just start there. Anyway, we stayed in somebody's house for about a week and a half. We stayed in somebody else's house for about a week and a half. Believe me, we prayed really hard because 6 of us in somebody else's house that is not very big, and everybody slept. All of my kids slept on the floor, and so they were praying hard. Dad, got to find a place to live. This would be really nice. But anyway, we were knocking on doors, and not literally, but just looking. And a real estate agent said, "Look, we may have one. We don't have any." We went to one town, said, "No, don't have anything." We thought we were going to live here, and when she found out that it was Americans with children, she's like, "I don't think I'm interested in that." So that's how all that fell through. And so lo and behold, we came into this small little town, this little community, and that's where God wanted us. So we were there about a month, and they had a festival down below our town. I said, "Seth, come on, let's go meet some people." So we went there, and not speaking anything Spanish or Basque, I tried to do my best, hola, whatever, and just show a friendly face. Nothing. Nobody budged. Not a smile, not a wave, not anything. And I looked at Seth driving back up, and I said, okay, now I understand. The next week, Jennifer, I guess essentially you can call her a potter. When we got married, she had a pottery wheel and a kiln, and she did some of that part-time, and then, on and off when the kids were growing up. And so we sold all of that when we went to the field. Jennifer said, I thought I was going to say goodbye to pottery, but it's still in here. So our little town has one of the best potters in our whole province. So we went up, and I said, hey, Jennifer, I surprised her. I said, let's go up and see. So we had never been in the town. We met the 2 ladies, and one thing about small towns, word travels quickly. So by the next day, everybody knew who we were, and it's like, okay. So I was standing out meeting the Amazon driver. They had a hard time finding my house for whatever reason, and this lady pulls up. She gets out, and she's just jibber-jabbering. I don't remember if it was Basque or Spanish. I didn't understand either. She's talking to her daughter. And they come around the car and give me a double cheek kiss, and her daughter gives me a double cheek kiss, and I'm like, okay, what is happening here? And the daughter spoke a little bit of English, and she said, we'd like to welcome you to our town. So we brought them into our house, which is very unusual. They were willing to come into our house, sat down for about an hour and a half, and that woman is basically the welcoming committee for that town. And basically, as one of that welcoming committee, whatever she said goes. And so she said, we've got a festival next week. Would you come to our town? And we said, sure, we'd love to do that. Instead of meeting everybody one by one, we got injected into the festival and met everybody all at once. And boy, talk about, because we had somebody who was warm to us, that immediately it set the tone for everything else. And so that whole town followed her lead and was warm to us. And now we're just like best buds. We go hiking. We do everything together with that town. We say, that's amazing. Yeah, it is. That's our God. I tell that to other people, even in the Basque region, other missionaries, and they go, that's really interesting. That's amazing. Well, let me just tell you, that's not us. That's God. I could never do that. I already tried. I try it all the time. Sometimes I fail, but you know what? It's God opening the doors, opening hearts, and we just look at that and say, okay, we know, so it's the church, it's the community, and I could go on and tell you stories, really opportunities within our church, but then opportunities within our community. We came back for a short time to put our oldest in college. This was 2018, and they knew we were traveling across America. So when we got back, they said, hey, one of our festivals, we want to hear what the American did on his vacation. And so we did the whole thing. We had hamburgers, which some of them never had a hamburger before. We brought marshmallows, and none of them had ever had marshmallows before. And you should have seen them. They were roasting. They're going, it's just like in the movies. You know, they didn't. You know, all they know is they see it in a movie, and that's what, you know. That's, of course, that's the Americans. That's what they do. They never tasted marshmallows before, and ironically, our pastor Matt Collier from Bethany happened to be there for part of the missionary teen retreat that we were doing. So we were juggling balls all at the same time that night. So he got to meet and to see what God was doing firsthand, and to go back and to tell our church family, look what God is doing. But at the end of that time, you know what I said? I said, okay, and every picture throughout that of every church we were with, we showed a picture. And so they kept seeing us with a church family, with a church family. And so I was able to tell them, I said, look, I said, we're family here, but also I have a bigger family. It's a church family. And in fact, it's universal. And here's why. Because there's a Savior. And it's yet another time, and I could tell you story after story. One time, one of the men who was our town leaders, he passed away. Well, we had a dinner right after that, about a month later. And I was sitting and I was dialoguing with his wife, and she asked me, you know, your church is a Baptist church? Tell me a little bit about that. Well, I was passing her seat and I was standing up, and so I was answering her question as best I could. And at some point, it occurred to me that it was really quiet. There was about 30 people all sitting in the end of the table, right? And so we were standing here, and she was sitting, and I was standing, dialoguing with her, and I look up, and everybody's looking at me. And it was kind of that awkward. They all kind of knew they had their hand in the cookie jar. It's just kind of like they're listening in on this conversation, right? And I stood there, laughed and smiled, and just kept going on. And I was able to tell everybody about God's grace, about salvation, about how free it is. And she wanted to know the differences again and again and again. It is yet sowing those seeds. And you look at those and say, God, I could have never manufactured that. I could have never. And, you know, I spend time with some of the guys, and, you know, we find out about their marriages, their divorce, what they're struggling with. And I try and, you know, would you, if I gave you a Bible, would you read the Bible? Nah. You know, would you come to church? Nah. But you know what? Being with them, I don't know how God can use that. All we can do is sow the seeds. And so there's our opportunities. And those are just things that we just say, okay, God, you have appointed us for this. And it is a special, special blessing. Let me tell you about one more you saw up on there. English camp. Like I said, we're standing on shoulders of giants. One who's been really digging up soil, literally, in her town. And because she has that relationship, she was able to bring Basque children. And uniquely, we had the 13-year-olds boys. And those boys just they didn't want to bring the girls. The boys just kept bringing other boys. And you saw pictures of that camp. And I mean, that's big for anybody to have 50 kids at your vacation Bible school, but to have an evangelistic, I mean, those kids, some of those had never, well, I would say majority, other than what they heard from Mimi, had never heard the gospel before. So to take 3 hours every day for a whole week, and some of them came every year. In fact, one of them, we at the end of that time, we gave them a prize. All right, we gave them a Bible or a gospel storybook. And again, they kind of follow each other. The first one, the leader, he was so excited to get his Bible. And so that generated it for everybody else. And that set the precedent that first year for all the other years. And they knew, I want my prize. I want my prize. They were dying to get it. And in fact, we pick it out of a hat, and they didn't know they're all going to get one. But, you know, they're anticipating, I want it. I can't have, I have to have it. And you're like, oh, okay. You know, before if I just gave them a Bible, it's like, no, I don't want the Bible. They were asking us for it and taking it home. And this last one we had, I was doing something special for one boy named Shabby. He plays football with Seth, and he kept waiting. He kept bugging Mimi every day. Where's my Bible? Where's my Bible? Where's my Bible? Is that not amazing? I mean, how many times do we get to see that? We're praying for Shabby. We're praying for those guys, ones that Seth interacts with virtually 2-3 times a week. God save them. They need to hear. Well, in some ways, we feel like we're just getting started. To be honest with you, we're just digging, throwing those seeds out. We don't know how God's going to use it. It's a really special thing. God has transitioned us now to be with a sister church. And at the same time we were doing that, someone from Mexico, a single guy, said, I believe God's calling me to Spain. And so he was in Madrid, and then he began looking, where would God have me? And he was looking in the Basque region, and he met someone, and so that's been ongoing. And in fact, last Saturday, they got married, and he believes God's called him to plant a church. And I said, well, isn't that interesting that God would bring us there? He's come from Mexico to there as well, and he wants to help start a church. And I said, that's what I've been looking for. God knows what he's doing. God knows how to bring all of that together. And, we don't see how all the interactions are working, but we know where he's leading, and it's just following him. Isn't that how it works, right? Following God's will. I see that shaking your heads and say, it's the same thing, whether you're here or on the other side of the world. Saying, okay, God, use me, lead me. I want to obey. I want to do what you're calling me to do. And I tell you what, it's a really exciting thing, isn't it? To be in the center of God's will. You don't know what's going to happen, but that's okay. God knows what he's doing. And he does that in all of our lives, doesn't he? And it's a special blessing. All right. I probably run over my time a little bit for at least my part. Does anybody have any questions? I definitely want to give you guys, and we'll be around all morning, but if anybody say, you know what, I bet a couple people are thinking this. Anybody have a question? Okay, Pastor.
The language that you guys speak is different from Spanish. So do they have a Bible that you can use in that language, or is there need to be a translated Bible?
The question is, okay, for Basque, is that what you're thinking? Okay, Basque, is there a Basque Bible? There is. It's been very slow going. They started in the 1500s, the New Testament, and they just finished the Old Testament even within the last 50 years. You think, oh, that's interesting. But you have a couple different dialects, and so even the Basque people we know don't read that. Now they put one in that Batua within the last 10 years, but it's put out by the Catholic Church. It has the Apocrypha in it, and so we're working with, something we would say that that's not our best look, for sure, but that's all we have. I've heard of somebody out west, there tends to be, like in Idaho, that's your greatest concentration of Basque people in the United States. I've heard a radio interview of somebody in Idaho that's saying, I believe God's leading me to be able to put out a good, solid Bible translation. And that's why another thing where we say we feel positioned that God is bringing a lot of pieces together, and we have the opportunity to be part of that. And so we don't know what the future is going to hold, but we know we have our part as well. Does that answer that question, Pastor? Yes. Go ahead, Melvin. Spanish. In Gipuzkoa, we are in the heart of the Basque country. So we're in the middle province that has the greatest concentration of Basque speakers, and we are in the middle of that, and everything around us. So you saw one picture that was kind of interesting, that was a words and an ear. So even now, within these last 5 years, they're starting to ramp up more and more to say, they would call it Belari pressed or ready to hear. So when you go to the buy your groceries at the little store in town. How do you interact with that person? Typically, that's how you would continue. If you said something in Spanish and you said, oh, how much is this or whatever, then he would probably answer you in Spanish and that would continue on. But if you initiated in Basque, he would probably, if he spoke it, he would probably continue. So it was the timidity, like they'll speak it in their homes, but then when they go out with their friends, they'll speak Spanish. And I was like, that's just really interesting. She speaks, our Spanish tutor, she speaks Basque in the homes, but when she goes out with her friends, she speaks Spanish. But they all speak Basque. So you're continuing this transition where they're just more and more saying, look, we're not ashamed to speak Basque, because even they see that years ago, 1900s, early 1900s, it was the peasants' language. It was, if you want to speak the king's language, you speak Spanish. And so you had all of that. Then you had the opposition from the dictator, and I don't have time to give all the history there. And then now it's opening back up again. And people my age say, the only reason I speak Basque is because my parents taught me under the table. Well, they're making sure that their children and their grandchildren are speaking Basque. And so they're really injecting that in. And all different ways trying to creatively say, let's get back what we had. And that's their heart language. That's how they think. That's how they interact. And you think how you would communicate even in one language, and then to say, okay, really to communicate in the heart language, it's totally different. And that's why I said when you communicate and you say, I'm going to learn your language, it means a lot to them. Everything is tied to that language. And that's a challenge, but in some ways it's really interesting. It's like they put building blocks together. It's like a peasant language. They make it really simple. And I don't know if any of you have learned one language or another language besides what you speak, but it's interesting to see how they like read between the lines. The words are there, but then with the context, you're like, oh, okay, I guess I can see how that, and you just have to learn how they do that. Well, with that nuts and bolts peasant language, they'll literally, a fireman is a fire killer, and they put that together. Fire killer, and so many words, and you're like, okay, you just get those base root words, and then you just keep putting them all together, even their suffix of where you're going to or from, they just add it onto the back of that word, and it's a fascinating study, but in some ways it's really simple, and it really tells you a lot about who the people are, that culture. They're simple yet deep. They've endured through all that persecution and come out the other side, but they've adapted. And we're asking God to give souls, some that are brave enough, some that God would call out to say, because they really have to stick their head above the crowd and say, that's what I want. I want Jesus Christ. And we've seen it. We have one family in our church who's all Basque, and he takes persecution. Why do you go to that church? And, that's so different. But he knows what God's done in his heart. And he sees it. His children are saved, and they're different. They say, oh, why are your kids different? And so it's beginning. It's beginning. And we know God can continue to do that. We have faith. And our God is a saving God. So, again, we'll be with you here in between and afterward, and we'd love to find out what's going on in your life. You ask us, we will gush. We want to tell you all about it. So feel free to do that, please. We would like that.
Okay, that's a nice piece of paper you got there. Make sure you stop by his table and grab a prayer card. Another thing, when you stop by his table, you know that they are experienced missionaries. You say, how do you know? They have candy on their table. They've been around. So you need to go and find out. I'm not going to tell you which kind of candy, but it's one of my favorites, okay? So go find out what kind of candy. They said that the children will be over there. I said, well, this church, the adults will be over there getting the candy. We like candy too. So we're excited to have them preaching this morning's service. And so we're going to be dismissed here in just a minute. I'll pray, and then we'll be back in about 15 minutes for our morning service. Let's pray. Lord, I thank you so much for your work all over this world. Lord, we have been placed here in Asheville and working here for you. No matter what our position is in a secular world, we know we've been placed here to spread the gospel, to be missionaries here to Asheville, North Carolina. Lord, thank you for that. Lord, I also want to thank you for the Willis family. And for such a time as this, you have sent them to Spain, to the village and the city that you have put them and placed them. You've given them their children. You've given them friends and sent people to help them. And Lord, for that I want to thank you. And what a great opportunity it is and responsibility to be involved in Spain and the evangelism of that country and through the Willis family. Thank you for them being our missions family here at Temple. And what a blessing it is to serve with them in Spain. Be with them, keep them safe. Lord, I pray that you'll help their children. I pray that you'll help the one at college as she's finishing up strong here at the end of the semester, the one going to college. Lord, I just pray that you'll help them, keep them safe, and guide and direct them. And we give you all the honor, glory, and praise. Be with us this morning as we hear from your word. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. You're dismissed. We'll see you at 15.